There comes a moment when the final sign appears, not in shadows, not in whispers, but like a trumpet blast from the heavens. A mystery long concealed has now unveiled itself before the eyes of the world. The pieces are in motion. The ancient warnings spoken by prophets of old, etched in the scrolls of eternity, are now manifesting in real time. A convergence is taking place, global shaking, cosmic patterns aligning, Israel standing at the center once more, and the nations trembling as if sensing what is about to break upon the earth. What if I told you the final sign has just appeared? Not metaphorical, not symbolic, but an undeniable marker in the heavens and on the earth, pointing to the imminent return of the King. This is not fiction. This is not speculation. The birth pains are no longer distant. They are here, intensifying. The trumpet is not silent. The fig tree is blooming, and the call of the bridegroom is drawing near. The door is about to shut. The midnight hour is upon us, and the last sign has come. We are standing in a moment unlike any other, a prophetic precipice where the signs foretold by the prophets of old are not simply approaching, they are converging in a way the world has never seen. The convergence is not random, not accidental, but orchestrated, divine, and precise. What once were isolated fulfillments, scattered tremors across the landscape of history, are now aligning, merging into a single, unstoppable tide. From the pages of Daniel to the visions of Revelation, we are watching as the threads of ancient prophecy are woven together into a living tapestry. And that tapestry declares one thing with absolute clarity: the hour is late. The earth is groaning. Creation itself, bound under the curse of the fall, is crying out with increased intensity. Earthquakes in diverse places, strange signs in the skies, the seas roaring, and nations in perplexity. The very elements seem to be stirred by something beyond the physical, a spiritual shaking echoing through the natural realm. These are not merely natural disasters or political shifts. These are harbingers, birth pangs, indicators that the culmination of the age is approaching. The prophetic clock set into motion thousands of years ago is now ticking at an accelerated pace, and every hand on that clock is pointing to a single, unavoidable truth. The King is near. But the signs are not only in the heavens or in the earth beneath. They are in the hearts of men. Lawlessness abounds, and the love of many has grown cold. Good is called evil, and evil good. The very moral foundations that once upheld civilizations are crumbling before our eyes. We are living in the days described by the Apostle Paul, when people would be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. The boastful part concerning the ones who hate us were disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. The spirit of the age is no longer hiding in shadows. It has emerged into the open with boldness and fury, shaking its fist at heaven and daring the judgment of God to fall. At the same time, the prophetic center of the world, Israel, is once again on the world stage, surrounded by turmoil, threats, and the stirrings of war. The rebirth of the nation was the super sign, the clock starting again. But now we are seeing more than just Israel's existence. We are seeing Jerusalem trembling, the Temple Mount rising in global tension, and the nations being drawn into a vortex of prophetic fulfillment. What the prophets foresaw, the gathering of enemies, the alignment of nations, the isolation of Israel, has become the daily headlines of the modern age. All of these streams, spiritual, moral, celestial, geopolitical, are converging with an urgency that demands attention. This is not business as usual. This is not the calm before the storm. It is the rumbling of the storm already upon us. The Spirit is testifying. The Word is aligning. The bride is being awakened from slumber. And those with eyes to see and ears to hear cannot deny what is happening. It is as if heaven itself is sending out one last warning, one last trumpet blast across the earth, saying, watch, prepare, be ready. The convergence is not a coincidence. It is the fulfillment. The time is not coming, it has come. The last days are not a future concept, they are now. And every sign, every tremor, every voice is declaring that the window is closing. The heavens have always been God's billboard, a vast expanse where divine messages are traced in light and shadow, and now they have erupted with a sign so precise, so mathematically elegant, that it silences the skeptic and electrifies the watchman alike. Imagine the same sky that once guided Abraham beneath its star-strewn tapestry, the firmament that heralded the birth of Messiah with a singular cosmic beacon, now unveiling a pattern that perfectly overlays the sacred calendar of the Scriptures. Not an accidental flare of stardust, not a random alignment, but a celestial choreography timed to the very day and hour foretold in ages past. The sun was darkened on a feast day ordained before Sinai's thunder ever shook the earth, and the moon blushed blood red in synchronous procession with the holy convocations, as if the feasts themselves had leapt from parchment to the planetarium above, declaring that the appointed times had reached their zenith. Astronomers calculated probabilities, pundits dismissed portents, yet the cosmic clock ignored the scoffers and kept its appointment. The eclipse pathway carved a scar across the nations most steeped in covenant history, as though a giant finger from beyond the galaxies traced a boundary line separating light from darkness. Telescopes watched, cameras clicked, but the true import could not be captured in pixels. It thundered in the spirit, reverberating with the echo of Sinai's trumpet. Every ancient observer knew that when the heavens darken at midday, judgment stands at the doorposts. And when the moon turns crimson over the land of promise, redemption draws nearer than breath. And the dual witnesses, sun and moon, the greater light and the lesser, testified together just as the Torah demanded two witnesses to confirm any matter, sealing the verdict in the vault of the sky. Look closer and see the constellations themselves, forming an age-old prophecy. The virgin crowned with the sun, the dragon crouched to devour, the scales tipping toward verdict. Between them marches the lion. Even the planets, those wandering stars, took their places like priests in procession, each loop and conjunction falling on days sanctified by fire and blood upon the altar. Cycles of 7 years, 7 months, 7 days spiraled through the data sets of astrophysicists, echoing the Shemitah and the Jubilee, the release of debts and the liberation of captives. The very mathematics of the cosmos preach repentance, declaring that the ledger of humanity is reaching its audit, and the trumpet of the shofar is poised at the lips of the angel. Ancient rabbis taught that before the end, every star would fulfill the role assigned to it at creation. Early church fathers wrote of signs in sun, moon, and stars preceding the day of the Lord. Today, satellites beam those very signs onto handheld screens, yet multitudes scroll past the miracle as though it were entertainment fodder. They do not hear the silent thunder rolling across the vacuum of space, but the remnant does. Hearts attuned to the Spirit feel the vibration of eternity pressing into time, a quickening like the rush of wind that filled the upper room. The heavens have issued their proclamation. The earthly realm must now respond. Just as a trumpet blast gathered Israel to the mountain, and another trumpet will call the dead to rise, so this engraved warning in the sky summons a generation to awaken, to lift their gaze from the flicker of dying empires to the blazing promise that rides on the wings of dawn. The streets of the world echo with a roar that began as a distant murmur, a rumbling beneath the surface of civilizations built on forgotten covenants. And now that roar bursts into daylight as nations rage against every boundary once etched by the Creator. Statutes are overturned in midnight sessions, ancient pillars toppled and sold as souvenirs of a brave new age, and the very definitions of life, marriage, truth, and justice are rewritten by councils enthroned on screens that beam across continents in an instant. It is as if the Tower of Babel has been rebuilt in silicon and glass, its algorithms speaking one digital language that unites rebellion from the megacities of the East to the rural hamlets of the West. And the human heart, intoxicated with its own autonomy, exults in the mantra, "We will be as gods." Yet behind the neon glow and the hashtags lies a darker pulse, the same violence that filled the earth in the days of Noah. The same predatory appetite that prowled Sodom's streets in the hours before fire rained from the sky, now flashing across news feeds as everyday footage, normalized, monetized, celebrated. Look to the corridors of power and see leaders who pledge peace with one hand while trading weapons with the other. Men who swear oaths on sacred texts, yet traffic in corruption so brazen that even their accusers grow numb. Justice is weighed on scales tipped by bribes, and the innocent languish while the guilty parade through gala banquets framed by crystal chandeliers. Meanwhile, the cities burn in waves of unrest. Storefronts shatter under fists wielding the rhetoric of liberation. Yet behind the slogans lurks an ancient serpent, whispering that destruction is freedom. Lawlessness spreads like wildfire through parliaments, classrooms, and pulpits alike, creating a generation untethered to conscience, unanchored from history, convinced that chaos is progress, and decadence a badge of enlightenment. The prophets warn that love would grow cold, that families would fragment, that children would rise against parents, and we are watching their words scroll beneath the flashing ticker of global headlines, each alert a fresh confirmation that the restrainer is lifting, the mystery of iniquity accelerating, and as the moral fabric unravels, the very earth seems to groan in sympathy, seas swelling, storms exploding with fury unseen in recorded memory, the ground splitting open in places where fault lines once slept. Economies reel like drunken men. Currencies falter, supply chains gridlock until supermarket shelves mirror the famine lines of bygone eras, too quickly forgotten. In the midst of it all, the remnant can almost hear the footsteps of angels moving among the shadows, marking doors, sealing hearts, calling the few who still tremble at the word to stand in the gap while mercy. For it was in such an hour that an ark door began to close, in such a dusk that two visitors urged a righteous man to flee the flames, about to engulf a valley glittering with sin's masquerade. Now the patterns repeat with eerie precision. Revelers dance under electric skies while prophets cry in wilderness corners. Strangers in their own lands, bearing a testimony, ridiculed by the very crowds it longs to rescue. Their voices swept aside by the frenzy of marketplaces, drunk on self-worship, and the whisper of rainless clouds promising satisfaction, yet delivering dust. All the while, The ancient book lies open, its pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen wind, declaring that what has been will be again, that the days of Noah and Lot stand not as mythic fables, but as warning beacons to a civilization hurtling toward the same precipice. Technology may cloak the abyss with augmented reality, but the abyss remains, widening beneath the feet of a generation sprinting toward the edge with eyes fixed on the glowing idols in their palm. There is still a narrow road, still a crimson doorpost, still a voice crying out among the dry bones. Yet the multitudes press on, deafened by the chorus of their own praise, unaware that the hourglass is nearly empty, and the judge of all the earth prepares to rise from his throne, while the incense of the saints rises with desperate urgency, and the winds of prophecy sweep through the streets. The land at the center of 3 continents, scarcely larger than a speck on a globe, has again become the fulcrum on which the destinies of empires tilt. Israel, reborn from the ashes of exile, resurrected in a single day after 2 millennia of dispersion, now stands encircled by the very powers named by prophets who walked its dust-laden hills. To the north, a bear stirs, forging packs of iron and oil, with a crescent host, forging packs of iron and oil, with a crescent host, moving armor and missiles ever closer to the Hermon Heights. To the east, ancient Persia reawakens under banners inscribed with apocalyptic vows, spinning centrifuges like whirlwinds of judgment and threading corridors through deserts once marched by Cyrus. To the south, the sons of Ishmael wrestle between the lure of commerce and the call of conquest. Their counsels divided, yet their swords increasingly turned toward Zion. In the councils of the West, once stalwart guardians of Israel's right to exist, the rhetoric shifts with each election cycle, sympathy cooling, resolutions dripping with the language of sanctions, while university squares erupt with chants that echo the oldest hatred disguised in the garments of social justice. Yet even as the encirclement tightens, alliances long deemed impossible bloom like almond blossoms in winter. Princes in white robes sign accords with citizens of a blue and white flag. Flights traverse deserts once closed by enmity, and trade routes whisper of a highway that Isaiah envisioned, stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Old foes shake hands on tarmacs, flooded with camera flashes, their signatures drying on documents that speak of peace and prosperity. Even as underground tunnels snake beneath borders and rocket arsenals multiply in coastal enclaves, the paradox intensifies. Olive branches extended in daylight, while daggers sharpen under moonlight. Intelligence dossiers speak of shadow wars, mystery explosions at nuclear sites, cyberspace plagues that cripple centrifuges, silent drones that strike convoys weaving through mountain passes. Each incident a move on a chessboard whose final gambit was scripted before Rome ever sacked the Temple Jerusalem. And meanwhile thrums with a tension that radiates from the western wall up through the limestone lanes to the contested plateau where a golden dome glints beneath desert sun. Pilgrims press foreheads against ancient stones. Soldiers patrol alleys where prophets once thundered. And archaeologists unearth seal impressions that bear the names of kings listed in chronicles. As if the earth itself testifies that the covenant still stands. On feast days, the city swells with nations. Eagle insignias beside maple leaves, African choirs beside Korean intercessors, fulfilling Zechariah's vision that peoples of every tongue would seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem. Yet outside the gates, resolutions at the United Nations label the same city a violation of international law. Every move around Israel reverberates through the corridors of heaven and earth. Ezekiel's roster of nations takes shape on diplomatic guest lists. Daniel's iron mixed with clay appears in fragile coalitions. Psalm 83's confederacy finds new life in summit communiques. Military analysts interpret satellite images Economists track pipelines. Theologians examine Hebrew verbs. But the convergence defies purely natural explanation. It is a script authored by the One who declared the end from the beginning. As threats rise, so does innovation. A startup nation sends satellites the size of shoeboxes into orbit. Interceptors paint the sky with iron umbrellas. Medics in olive drab rush field hospitals to disaster zones while the world denounces them in resolutions drafted thousands of miles away. And within the land, a remnant awakens. Soldiers hum psalms in Merkava tanks. Children memorize prophets by flashlight during blackout drills. Prayer watches light up stone arches from Galilee to Eilat, while seismic rumblings beneath the Temple Mount hint that the earth remembers the footsteps of the One who once cleansed its courts with cords of righteous fire, and that he will set his feet there again when the smoke of surrounding wars has cleared, and the nations discover too late that the stone they rejected has become the cornerstone of everything. The sanctuary, once ablaze with holy fire, now flickers with artificial light, smoke machines replacing incense, and the roar of subwoofers drowning the still small voice that once thundered from Sinai. In pulpits where prophets once trembled under the weight of revelation, sleek motivational speakers now weave sermons of self-affirmation, trimming the sword of the Spirit into a harmless butter knife lest it offend the sensibilities of a culture drunk on its own reflection. The word that once splits souls and marrow is repackaged as a brand, its hardest edges sanded smooth, its call to repentance exchanged for the promise of personal enhancement and therapeutic calm. Congregations who once wept at altars now sway beneath LED halos, hands raised not in surrender, but in pursuit of the next emotional high, mistaking goosebumps for glory, while the lampstand of true presence slips unnoticed from its place. Doctrinal anchors are hoisted and cast aside. Creeds hammered out by martyrs are recast as relics of intolerance. The bloodstained cross is painted in pastel hues. The empty tomb repurposed as a metaphor for living your best life. And sin, once a cancer requiring the scalpel of grace, is rebranded as a lifestyle choice to be celebrated. Shepherds once charged to guard the flock invite wolves to share the stage, applauding their insights on relevance while the sheepfold is quietly bled white beneath the neon. The warning of Jude echoes, certain men have crept in unnoticed, but now they stride through wide open doors, carrying credentials minted by institutions that traded reverence for relevance, eternity for enrollment numbers, holiness for hashtags. In gatherings across the earth, communion cups sit untouched because talk of broken bodies and shed blood feels too visceral for refined palates. The baptismal waters grow stagnant as membership rolls swell with unregenerate hearts content to add Jesus as an accessory while bowing to the idols of the age. The great falling away is no longer a theological concept debated in seminar rooms. It is a silent exodus, unfolding pew by pew as congregants slip into the night. Not driven out by persecution, but lulled to sleep by cotton candy homilies that dissolve on the tongue and leave the soul famished. A famine of hearing the true word spreads, even as sermons multiply in every language, streamed to every screen. Yet like Pharaoh's gaunt cattle, they devour plenty while remaining emaciated. Meanwhile, a remnant weeps between porch and altar, watching lamp oil dwindle, while 10,000 voices proclaim a false dawn. They grasp battered Bibles whose margins are stained with tears, refusing to trade the ancient paths for labyrinths of post-truth relativism. They feel the grief of the Spirit as sacred vocabulary. Grace, faith, love gets hijacked, emptied, refilled with doctrines of demons that promise liberty but chain souls to darkness. They discern the whisper of the serpent coiled behind inclusive slogans. Hath God really said? They recognize the stagecraft that mimics Pentecost but lacks the piercing flame that once divided tongue and heart, turning fishermen into firebrands. They sense the countdown within the courts of heaven, the moment approaching when judgment must begin at the house of God. When the refiner strides into his temple with eyes of blazing fire, and the threshing floor is winnowed with holy breath. In corridors of ecclesiastical power, councils debate pronouns while ignoring the pronouncements of Him whose voice shakes both heaven and earth. The ancient charge, be holy, for I am holy, is redlined by committees seeking cultural synergy. Yet holiness is the currency of the kingdom, and without it, no one will see the Lord. So altars built for sacrifice become catwalks for spiritual influencers, and the fragrance of crushed hearts is replaced by the scent of branded candles burned to mask the stench of compromise. Yet beneath the din arises a cry, return to your first love, strengthen what remains, buy gold refined by fire, that you may be rich, white garments that you may be clothed, eye salve that you may truly see. For the bridegroom stands at the door, his hand on the latch, and when he enters, the masquerade will shatter like glass under the weight of glory, and every work wrought in wood, hay, and stubble will ignite as tinder before the consuming gaze of the one whose voice once walked in the garden in the cool of the day, while the fig leaves rustled with the hush of approaching judgment. A rumble rises from the hidden chambers of the spirit realm, a vibration that darts through prayer closets and catacomb sanctuaries, jolting hearts that once beat to the lullaby of routine. It begins as a whisper, watch, the bridegroom is coming, and explodes into a trumpet blast that shatters complacency like crystal under a hammer. Ordinary people bolt upright at midnight, visions blazing behind their eyelids, and sermons ignite on their tongues before dawn, for the very air now crackles with the current of approaching glory. Workplaces turn into pulpits, kitchen tables into communion altars, and school corridors echo with spontaneous hosannas as students kneel on linoleum floors. Warehouse break rooms birth Bible studies between forklift shifts. Coffee shops become cenacles scented with espresso and incense. Pastors who once dreaded empty prayer meetings find sanctuaries jammed at sunrise, oil spots darkening carpet where foreheads press for hours. The wall clock spins faster, hours compressing into moments thick with destiny, so that a single obedient whisper accomplishes what a decade of strategy never touched. The urgency is not born of fear, but of an intoxicating glimpse of soon coming glory. The bride looks into the mirror of the Word and finally sees herself through the eyes of the one whose love burns scars into his wrists. She flings off garments of compromise like grave clothes, slips into linen woven from righteous acts, and adorns herself with jewels of mercy, justice, and humble obedience. Amusements that once pacified now feel like sand. Social feeds that siphoned affection are abandoned for nights drenched in intercession and scripture-soaked stillness. Across continents, believers who have never met feel threaded together by invisible sinews of purpose. A missionary in the Amazon and a widow in Seoul wake simultaneously, compelled to intercede for an underground church in Tehran, about to face midnight. Fasting chains link villages in the Sahel to high-rise apartments in Manhattan. Songs birthed in one language erupt from worshipers half a world away who do not know the tongue. Harmonies blending as though coached by unseen choirs, for the Spirit conducts a symphony without rehearsal, and every heart plays its appointed measure. Signs follow the awakened bride. Tumors vanish mid-worship. Addictions snap like brittle twigs. Hardened skeptics crumble at a single word of knowledge, voiced by trembling children who never studied apologetics. Demons shriek as forgotten saints rediscover authority and reclaim neighborhoods long ceded to darkness. Provision flows through improbable channels. Groceries on doorsteps, mortgages erased, orphanages funded overnight through anonymous transfers that leave bankers muttering about glitches, yet the givers weep with joy because treasure has finally found its proper vault. Watchmen who nearly laid down their trumpets feel fresh breath fill their lungs. They climb the walls again, scribbling warnings in digital code that ricochets across continents in milliseconds. The call stitches charismatics to liturgicals, house churches to cathedrals, persecuted saints to privileged worshipers in virtual upper rooms where glowing screens become windows to Zion. Economists cannot model the generosity released when hearts sync with heaven's countdown. Farmers tithe grain to feed refugees they will never meet. Hedge fund managers liquidate portfolios to bankroll Bibles smuggled through desert checkpoints. College students binge watch the minor prophets while coding apps that beam scripture into dialects uncharted by missionary maps. Yet the summons remains sober. Keep oil in the lamp. Trim every wick. Resist the narcotic of distraction. For when the cry pierces midnight, only vessels ready will rise at the shout. Shofars blare in suburban cul-de-sacs. Banners of intercession ripple over city roofs. Old men who once scoffed at visions now see. Chariots of fire racing across hospital ceilings. Infants stir in cribs at melodies drifting from realms unseen. And somewhere beyond the veil, a door begins to swing on hinges of. If this message stirred your spirit, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with others who need to hear this urgent truth. Comment below what God is speaking to your heart in this hour. Let us stand together, watch together, and prepare together, for the King is coming.